as we look at the right-hand side of our screen, he's down under 4.5 minutes. He's also down a pawn on the board. What do you think he's going to do?
Well, e3 check was my instinct, but there's the sunk cost effect. If that's the move he wanted to play, he probably would have made it 10 minutes ago. Apparently, king to h7 is a move that's as good, if not better, than e3. What a cold-blooded move that would be. Potentially walking into a fork, but hitting that rook on g6, trying to get it to move to f6, which is actually a really awkward square, and then setting up a potential knight sack on b3. Let's see what he did. He put his knight on d4 immediately. Okay, knight takes b3 now, potentially on the horizon, Robert. I don't know if I could take this. This is peak tension on both boards now, with Pragnananda under 6 minutes, and no bishop c1 on the board just yet.
Oh, Pragnananda needs to find a move. Here, Gukesh on the right-hand side of our screen. He needs to find this follow-up here, because knight d4 actually is an odd move. I don't at first see, besides knight takes b3 ideas, trying to get my outside pass pawn to the other side, but that's not going to work out with the rook on g6, always able to slide back to g1. I think it's combining the ideas, Daniel. e3 check with knight takes b3 in some positions, and also after e3 with the open e-file, the rook can stop on e4, and it's just awkward for white, because what you really want to do for black is take the e4 pawn and just chuck it away and play rook e2. So
exactly.
What do you think, Danya? I mean, how do you see Gukesh responding?
Well, Firouzja, doing what you're supposed to, posing the maximum dilemma to your opponent, I would almost consider dropping the knight back to e3, rewinding, unspooling the tape, but then you have to deal with a potential rook trade. And I'm just going to show before Firouzja moves, really fast, before Gukesh moves, that is actually why king h7 was potentially the strongest move. By forcing the rook to f6, knight d4 would actually set up the threat of knight takes b3, because in this position, you don't have the move rook to g1. So that was an incredibly deep concept. On the other hand, Robert, now this rook has a million directions that it can move to. It can give a check. It can go back. The knight can go back. 5 minutes on Gukesh's clock. How on earth do you calculate what you need to make an informed decision here? e3 and rook e4, your idea, also knocking on white's door.
Oh, this is such a delicate position, because e3, as you said, is such a nasty looking idea where it seems to just give away a pawn, and yet black is holding on with some active play. And we said this before, we'll say it again. These top players, they don't want to sit passively with equal material. They'd rather give up a pawn, perhaps 2 pawns, if that means that they have ideas of their own and aren't just waiting for their opponent to go after them. So, Danya, that rook has many options. Where do you think it'll go?
Rook b6 is the best move, and he's played it. He's played it. What a cold-blooded lateral move, preventing knight takes b3, hitting the pawn, but opening the doors for e4. That's the move which would terrify me, Robert. E3, knight e3, rook e4. And it's not time to count the blessings and pop the champagne just yet. If you're Gukesh fans, this is going to get very tactical, and white will have to be super precise to stop this potential pass pawn on f5.
You just see here, I mean, Gukesh, rook to b6 after the b7 pawn now. Knight f6. If you take on b7, knight f6, rook h7 is checkmate, right? So that is something for Alireza Firouzja to be worried about, as he is now down to about 3.5 minutes. I mean, Danya, his clock is ticking ever so low. It feels like this is one that, even if it is holdable without time on the clock, how do you find the way?
I'm just looking for alternatives to the move e3, right? Because e3, rook e4 is such a painful move to play, right, Robert? Your pride of your position, to give it away like that, to chuck it aside, it's hard to do. But the f pawn, paradoxically, is the pawn that you can actually push. Should I show this on the board really quickly?
Go for it.
e3 check. Why? To vacate the square formerly occupied by the pawn. Remember, the knight can't move, because then the rook infiltrates and you lose the a pawn. If you take b7, it's easy with the eval bar to think that this is just winning. But if I look at the position with my eyes, f4 is coming, rook e2 is coming. I have no idea if I'm better or potentially even worse. Maybe you can set up a mating net with knight d5, but try anticipating that with 5 minutes on the clock. Firouzja, under 3 minutes. Time pressure, part 2.
I mean, mating nets against the black king on the horizon. For white, this e3 check with the rook coming to e4, it does seem to stop white just before he can go all out for the black king. So rook b6, I like the move. Firouzja down to 2 minutes. I don't like that at all. And actually, if we have to bring up both boards, two board view,
Oh,
because it looks like Pragananda down to 5 minutes. That bishop for Fabiano, Danya, we know where it wanted to go at long last.
well, you called it. It reached its destination. It's like National Lampoon's Vacation, that 80s movies. They went across the country to visit a theme park. The theme park ends up being closed. That bishop went all across the board to c3. Pragnananda found bishop c1. And now he simply chases the bishop out of c3. And if it goes back to b4, it's not stable on that square because eventually white can push c3. And Fabi cannot afford to lose the second a pawn because he's actually going to be worse if that happens.
And is he going to have to, let's say, move the bishop? I'm not sure if you go back to b4, give the check on e1. I think giving the check on e1 makes a lot of sense because it frees this is the left-hand side of our screen, everybody. It frees the kingside rook up to go to c7. I think all of his winning chances come down to sacrificing his extra material on c4. But Alireza Firouzja, he just made his move. Where did he go? Knight c2.
Oh my gosh, there's lines there with rook h. Okay, no. Rook h6, king g7 is fine. Why is the eval bar so high up? Is it 93? What is it?
Well,
is it just
perhaps
rook takes b7?
It's the mate. Oh my gosh, we have to bring up the board. Yeah, Firouzja is relying on a pass pawn to save the day. But Daniel, rook takes b7. If e3 check, white does not have to give up the knight for that pawn. King to e2. The knight goes to d4 with check.
That's
and I think king d3.
No, but it's not the end of the story. Look at this. If black plays e2, knight f6. Now, everybody, rook h7 is mate. Rook e3 check. Do I take the rook? No. Well, I take the knight.
Actually, taking the rook almost still wins, but no, take the knight. I mean, the rook could give another check, a desperado on e4, just as long as white doesn't take it and keeps going. It's over. Rook h7 is mate.
And black can try a desperation tactic here with knight takes b3. That's actually a genius move because here, after AB, look at this, Robert. E2, same position after king d4. Rook takes h3 wins for black because both pawns cannot be stopped at the same time. Did he find this? Is that what he was investing his time in? And I'm just going to reveal that in this position, the only cleanly winning move is knight f6 anyway, allowing the fork, liquidating into this winning knight endgame because white is just going to round up the pawn and the c pawn will decide the game. This is, I don't know if there was a way for this round to over-fulfill expectations, but this is crazy. If he plays rook takes b7, I'm going to jump out of my chair.
I mean, we were just harping on the mating net so we understand where Gukesh should be heading. But that knight takes b3 out of thin air. It looks like the square was completely covered in this line. And yet it's about both of those passed pawns. So this is this moment for Gukesh, he needs to find the way forward. Because if he allows that pawn to e3 on the next turn, Danya, it doesn't look like he'd be winning anymore.
No, and you can lose this with white. You're walking on razor wire, allowing a queen promotion, ladies and gentlemen, with under 3 minutes on the clock. Pragnananda has fully equalized. Fabi's advantage has been wiped out completely. Now his only advantage is on the clock. That game's off the rails too. But let's look at Gukesh. 2 minutes. Oh my gosh, maximum tension. Will he take on b7? And Robert, are there any other moves which maintain a winning advantage?
I would be tempted to go knight back to e3 just to try to repeat if I can, because you get 30 seconds with every move made. But then I'd be nervous. Am I actually repeating? Can you trade knights? He found the best move. Gukesh, if he wins this game, Danya, he's leading the candidates. And if you're going to win the candidates, you have to find moves like rook takes b7, allowing your opponent to promote to deliver a checkmate.
It's what Jan did in the last round against Vidit. Calculation on demand. Calculation, despite 100,000 millions of people watching your every move. Knight f6 is the devastating threat. But Robert, this is just step one. If Firouzja can find knight d4 and knight takes b3, there will be another big test. Gukesh will have to spot knight f6, allowing the fork on c5. But it might not come to that. Firouzja just might panic here and make a move like rook e6. in that case, I think knight e3 basically seals the deal.
Well, white currently is up 2 pawns. That b7 pawn, very important because it allows the c4 pawn to quickly go to the other side. So white's pawns, they're not stuck in place. So trades help decide who's ahead material. Here, white is ahead by 2 pawns. And boy, will they start running to the other side. So e3 check, that seems to be the only idea because, well, if you don't do that, you're not getting anywhere.
30 seconds.
But yeah, Gukesh has worked it out.
And he's gone rook e6.
Danya, your knight e3 looks very strong, and you probably are other moves as well, but knight e3 just stops that pawn from ever pushing forward.
But there is one trick, there is one glimmer of hope for Firouzja, other than Gukesh's nerves giving in. It's knight e3, rook d6, a crazy move, giving away the knight, but then winning it back and garnering the a2 pawn. And if Black can get the double passers, keep the e pawn, and get the passed a pawn, it's going to be winning for white. But in the time scramble, it's easy to get confused. Which pawn do I stop? Do I push my passers? The best move here is rook e7, but that wasn't on my radar at all for some reason. That still allows Black to play e3.
Then the king can go to e2, I guess, and because the rook trade is on tap, perhaps white barely stops that pawn from getting to the other side. But that's a complicated line down. I'm with you. Rook e7 didn't come in my mind either. And that knight e3, rook d6 move, that's huge because it's not about the quantity. It's about the quality of your pawns. You'll hear me say this every single time I commentate, that rook d6 to d2 check. You trade knights in a fancy way, but the a2 pawn is loose, and then black will actually have the best pawn on the board, and white may be forced to give up material just to stop both the a and the e pawns.
My heart is beating out of my chest. I cannot imagine what pressure the players are under. Rook e6 was a genius defensive resource by Alireza. He didn't just stubbornly go on tilt and push e3. He calculated. He saw that it was losing. He knows that Gukesh is a genius calculator. And now it's Gukesh under a minute with the candidates potentially hanging in the balance, clear first with a victory going into the last round.
Rook e7.
And he's just done it again.
What a find by him. I mean, this guy he is resilient, and every single wrench that Firouzja is throwing at him, he dodges. This is just such a good find because, Danya, it seems that the pawn push, it looks scary, but it doesn't actually get you that far from the black side because the rook trade is on tap.
And what also looks scary, trade on e7 and knight b4 wins the a pawn, but I think Gukesh has calculated that his c pawn promotes first by a tempo. This is incredible. Hanging on razor wire with under a minute. He trusts his calculation. He doesn't make the safe move. He makes the correct one instead. But the game goes on, Robert. It goes on. Firouzja keeps the rooks on the board. Is it now time for white to push? And will Firouzja make it difficult by dropping his knight back and hang on through the 6th rank?
You know what's interesting? Is the h3 pawn really hanging? In some positions, knight f6 will freeze you, but the rook on the h file does cover the checkmating square, the idea we're talking about. If I'm Gukesh here, you can't really protect the h pawn unless you move your king to the side. I don't want any part of that. Exactly. Your arrows are telling the story. b4, c5, I don't know what move order. Push your passed pawns.
b4, I think, is more accurate because if you look at the 6th rank, the b6 square is protected. He's gone with the other pawn. c5, knight d4 on the board. Firouzja, he won't let go. He won't give up. He's making it as difficult as possible. Robert, does Gukesh continue pushing, giving up this h3 pawn?
I think moving his king.
No.
He looks like he's going to put his king on g3 or g2. G2 stays out of check's way, so I think that is the better square. And look at Firouzja. It's blitz now. I mean, they both are down to about a minute. And for Firouzja, he is trying everything that he can stir up here. Danya, what's next?
Well, rook g6 check, I think, will repeat moves. So king g2 is a move to garner that extra minute by Gukesh. Just make Firouzja think for a while longer. I don't think that Gukesh is going to go to the h-file and get mated himself with knight f3. The same reciprocal idea was possible. They repeat once, and now it's time to take another plunge, to play b4. How many trials and tribulations will Gukesh have to go through to seal the deal here? Another difficult moment.
He's trying to relax himself, and it was smart to gain the extra time. 30 seconds added to your clock with every move made. So a repetition, as long as it doesn't end in a draw, you are happy about if you're Gukesh. You want more time. He knows he's winning. I like your pawn push, Danya. I think it is time. Just throw those pawns forward, give up the h3 pawn, and keep on going. But that knight on d4, the black knight is stopping both B and C pawns, so it would appear. And let's not forget about the A3 pawn. You could see some opportunities for black because that pawn looks scary.
And the problem is you can play b4, but how do you proceed? How do you inch those pawns forward one square further? Rook b7, that looks a little bit slow. Gukesh under a minute again. There is that increment, but boy, do those 30 seconds disappear quickly. I'm keeping an eye on the other board. Robert, it's still objectively equal. Prague is under 2 minutes, but the evaluation hasn't changed. If it does, we will go back to the two-board view, but this is where the action is at. And another critical moment. 30 seconds now for Gukesh. Can he keep his composure?
He needs to. All of India is rooting for him. If he converts this, he is the sole leader with 1 round to go in the candidates. But look at him. He's looking left and right. He might be having flashbacks to their earlier matchup when he lost in a time scramble.
And seconds.
Danya, he's got to move. He's got to find a plan. I think he should push his pawn.
And he does.
Oh my gosh. The fortitude, Danya.
But what does he do after rook h3? This kicks the can down the road. Firouzja should grab that pawn ASAP, keep pressuring Gukesh's time. Also tempting is getting the king out of the mating zone. King g8 and king f8 looks very slow. It looks lame, but it could make it difficult for Gukesh. But no, he takes on h3. Gukesh slides the king away, kicking the rook away. The rook has to remain on the h-file, Robert, to prevent this knight f6 idea. We're going to see rook h6.
Yeah, if the rook could somehow slide away, that would be good for the activity, but the king is caught in the corner, so rook h6 makes perfect sense. And then, Danya, I think rook to b7 for white. Bring that rook over, try to push your pawn. That knight on d5, it's creating checkmating threats and stopping black's pass pawn from pushing.
Rook b7. It's the simple moves that did the trick this game at various critical junctures. It's not glamorous. You tell your opponent exactly what you want to do. Yeah, you can't stop me, dude. You don't have enough pieces. And I think Alireza sees it. He sees the roadmap to promotion. Rook b7, b5, c6. And at that point, you just close your eyes and push. And that you cannot allow if you're Alireza. Can he find any other ways to keep his defensive chances alive?
He just needs to bring his rook back. I don't know where he plans to go besides h6. Rook h4, eyeing the f4 pawn, so that if the white knight ever leads, that doesn't look that good either. And of course, a rook trade will immediately result in a winning position for white. So the rook has moved. Rook b7, Danya. I think we see that Gukesh knows that he's in charge.
One move after another, after another, after another. It doesn't matter. Give him 15 moves to find. He will find all of them. This was the key move. Firouzja can't stop b5. If he plays knight c6, knight e6, then he allows c6. I don't see any other tricks. Maybe put a rook on c6. But Robert, then you allow b5 and knight f6 again?
We are going to say the same thing, partner, that the rook needs to stay either on the h-file or the 6th rank. Because if that knight gets into f6, the rook will have to be able to cover the h7 square. And you see, he popped the collar. He just is able to roll up them sleeves because Gukesh may find himself in clear first place heading into the final round. Danya, after he lost to Firouzja, many people wrote him off. But what Gukesh is doing here as a 17-year-old, it's almost unheard of.
This is genuinely unprecedented. Maybe Magnus, the only player in history I know of who demonstrated this level of composure at this level. The game isn't over yet. The score sheets aren't signed. You need to push these pawns skillfully. b5, confidently executed. He's up to 2 minutes. He can breathe a little bit more peacefully now. Pragdananda, in the meantime, Robert, he's playing on increment and he's in trouble, but that game progressing a lot more slowly. Let's watch Gukesh put the finishing touches. Which pawn does he push? I would not allow the knight to sacrifice itself for these 2 pawns because, Robert, it gets dangerously close there to rook and knight versus rook. It's winning, but you don't want that margin. Maybe go with the other pawn.
I actually think that both moves are relatively straightforward at this stage. Gukesh has done everything right. But if the knight does sacrifice itself for those 2 pawns, white has enough pawns remaining, and the white king will jump into the action. So I think that c6, Firouzja might not have a choice but to sacrifice the knight, and then it's, as they say, a matter of technique.
It is indeed. Gukesh, look at the professionalism, taking his time, deciding which pawn to push. C6 is totally winning. I agree, Robert. At this point, it's largely a matter of taste, but he's going to do it the way that he's always done it. The maturity, the poise. He needs 2 or 3 more moves before Firouzja will stop the clocks. Back to the 2-board view we go, because Praggnanandhaa, under 30 seconds, is collapsing, and understandably so.
There was no way. Earlier in that game, we looked at it. It felt like there was no way that Praggnanandhaa would be able to survive. And Fabiano Caruana, he is getting not just a big win, a necessary win. If he draws while Gukesh wins, he can no longer get first place. So Fabiano needs this, and Gukesh is earning it, pushing the B pawn. You called it, Danya, the right-hand side of our screen. Gukesh is finding all of the best moves, and now on the left-hand side for Fabiano, he needs to do the same because he cannot afford to let this slip. I think the players are getting new score sheets. No, it's not over, but they're getting new score sheets. They tricked us there for a second. Danya, it is looking like it's going to be over shortly, though.
And I saw that white can actually get mated. Rook h2 by black in the game on the right. King e3 would walk into knight c2 mate. Firouzja, it's the mark of these super GMs. They never die. Gukesh still has to be vigilant, still has to dodge one last threat. But rook c7, you don't have to go to e3. You can go back to f1. Maybe you can go back to e1, but it's easy to allow a perpetual there and get scared. Oh, the game continues. Under a minute again. Everyone holding their breath.
Yeah, Gukesh, he is doing the right thing, though, because he gains those 30 seconds every turn. We see him just make his move. He slides his rook over, clearing the path for his b-pawn. That's on the right-hand side of our screen. I mean, that pawn is about to approach the finish line because it's going to checkmate the black king if it does become a queen. And we see these two players, they're locked in battle. But Danya, I mean, there's not much that Firouzja can do. He can try to create that checkmate, but Gukesh will sidestep it.
That's child's play for him. He wasn't born yesterday. Well, he essentially was at 17 years old. I can't believe what I'm saying, but rook h2, king g3, Robert. I think that is the sealer move. That king on g3 has the entire expanse of the king side to dodge any attempts at a perpetual. Look at Gukesh changing his seating posture. That pawn is 2 steps away from promotion. Here it is. This is the moment. I think the game is over.
Oh, and you can see it on Firouzja. He just gave that head shake. He understands that all of these tactics that he's relying on, they are not going to work. Yes, amazing accuracy under pressure. Gukesh, he is 17 years old, but he will be in first place in these candidates. And Firouzja doesn't even look like he wants to play another move. The way he's staring at the board, shaking his head, looking at the clock, he is now down to just 20 seconds himself. And he gives the check, Danya. It's maybe just one check, and that's it.
And the statement move, that white king dodges any remaining shenanigans, and the pawn will advance to b7. I think Firouzja stops the clocks here. There is nothing left to play for. Nothing left to give but a bunch of spite checks. This was a tour de force. Bearing in mind the circumstances, Gukesh will be in clear first by half a point. What a moment.
There it is.
And Firouzja stops the clock.
The handshakes, and Gukesh officially is our leader in the candidates with 1 round to go. All of India can rejoice for this win, but there is 1 round left. He will face off against Hikaru Nakamura, what could be a matchup for the title. So Gukesh Damaraju, the 17-year-old, he is doing unheard of things. He is a prodigy, but he doesn't want people to talk about his future prospects. He can be, with 1 more good round, the challenger to the world championship throne. And oh my goodness,